we have a very special guest on the show today. When I first came across this guest, I was I was very, very deep into the thinker, James the Thinker Smith.
Oh, geez. I think the universe revolves around that.
And he had said to me, he goes, listen, if you want to see what I want to do and how to apply it, check out this guy, Erik Korem. Now, which was very interesting. This was back in his Pitt days, I think, or it might have been right after they were fired from Pitt or something. And then one of my friends ended up trying to send his brother to you. David Plum tried to send Lucas Plum.
Oh gosh, yes.
It was when you were at University of Kentucky, right?
He ended up going to Troy with Neil Brown, who was our coordinator, who I showed his film to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I've known of you in depth for years, and this is actually the first time we've talked face to face.
We've DM'd and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've slid in his DM a handful of times. But this is the first time, and I've been quietly stalking from a distance for years. So you were at Kentucky, then you went to Florida State, and then you went to Texas, and now the William and Mary. How can you refresh me on this? Because
So just for everybody listening, my background, I started as a traditional strength coach, but my life really changed around 2005. I was at the University of Arkansas as a graduate assistant, and it was right after the Olympics. And a coach walked in one day and said, "Hey, you want to train these folks?" And it was Veronica Campbell-Brown. Tyson Gay was kind of in the area. Wallace Spearman and her soon-to-be husband, Omar. I'm like, yes. And so I developed a very close relationship. And that year, Veronica, I started doing all of her strength conditioning, and Omar, and was kind of doing a little bit with Tyson at the time. But I got to go to the World Championships for track in Helsinki, and my world just changed because I started seeing all this different stuff going on. I was part of Veronica's team for a long, long, long time, including when she won her second gold in the 200. She's one of two women to ever do that. And got to travel the world. And that's kind of where I got bitten by this bug of high performance. And I'm like, there's got to be a different way to do this. And so ended up at Mississippi State later down the line as a strength conditioning coach, speed coach, because I've had all this track stuff I've been doing. And then Coach Jimbo Fisher got the job at Florida State. I knew nobody. And you're going to love this story. And he's looking for a speed guy. And so a friend of mine was like, "Hey, drop my name." I get a call. There's "We'd like you to come down." So I drove myself down to Florida State, and I meet with Jimbo Fisher. And before I go in, they're like, "Hey, Jimbo's going to interview 3 or 4 other people." They threw the names, some of the names. I'm like, oh my gosh, nobody knows me. And we get in a conversation, and he's like, Jimbo's super smart. He remembers everything. And he's got this really kind of quirky, he's like, "Nark, what is it about speed that nobody else gets?" I was like, the feet. I was like, nobody's training the feet. From the knee down, there's so much force that application is lost. And he left his chair. And he was like, "I've been telling people for years, it's all about the ankles and knee bend and all this kind of stuff." And literally he's like, "Erik, just leave the room." I leave, and I come back and I have a job offer. Not only that, he put me on the field that day to coach. And I was blessed, man, because we had Mark Stoops as our defensive coordinator, James Coley, Damian Craig, Rick Trickett. We had a dynamite all-star coaching staff. And so Eddie Graham was our running back coach. And so while I was there, after I was the nutrition coach and the speed coordinator. Well, I was doing a little bit of everything. On the road, I was responsible for setting up all the nutrition. I was doing all this ops stuff with strength conditioning. So after our first season, this guy, Andy Urbanek, retired, and he is a legend in Pittsburgh. in the state of Pennsylvania. Like, he's in the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame. Like, Jackie Sherrill and him know each other. This guy's a legend. And Andy recommended me to be the DFO. This is Florida State, you know. First of all, I'm a strength conditioning coach. I have no experience leading this type of deal. So at that time, they were valued at almost $300 million. And so Jimbo was like, Eric, I want you to be the DFO. I was like, listen, I'll do whatever you say. Can you name me Director of Sports Science? He's like, yeah, you can call yourself whatever you want. And so it opened this door, because what I got to do is I had always been like, until you're in the meeting room with the coaches all the time, until you're listening to how they evaluate film and all the problems they really have, you can never really understand what's needed. And so after that spring, I told Jimbo, listen, I got invited to go to Australia to help a startup Australian rules football team, the Greater Western Sydney Giants. And John Quinn was the high performance director, and he is a legend. He was the sprint coach for the Aussie 2000 Olympic team. And Quinny had actually come to Florida State. Long story short, the GWS Giants were their head coach was Kevin Sheedy. He's like the Don Shula of AFL. He is a legend. He came from Essendon, won multiple premierships. And they're like, listen, we have a good and a bad problem. The good thing is we're going to get all these basic first-round picks, like 20 or 30 of them. He's like, the bad news is they're 17, 18. They're not going to be any good until they're 25, 26. With free agency, how do we keep them? So they say, could you help us create like a college environment where they feel like this camaraderie, they don't want to leave? So I was like, I'll come if you teach me about sports science and high performance. And so I was just blessed. I got to go literally for a month. I took my wife with me and my friend Joe Danos, who went on to the New York Giants for a while. And I learned about athlete tracking. I learned about what a high performance unit, how they actually function. And it just blew my mind. So I go back to Florida State. I'm like, Jimbo, I told him about the high performance director's role. And this is his response. He's like, because, you know, high performance director, you're overseeing all this stuff. And he's like, sounds like the job of a head coach to me. That was like, it ain't happening. But then I told him about the athlete tracking and what I thought it could do for us to quantify the game. It would help us understand what's going on in practice. And he was all over it. So Catapult didn't exist. So they literally flew a guy from Australia. He would like sleep on the couch in my office. And I hired a former NASA propulsion engineer. He was out of a job. He was like in a closet. And we're literally taking duct tape and strapping these things on the pads every day and cutting them off with scissors. And I'm sorry if I'm rambling here. You tell me when to shut up.
Mate.
We love this. Keep going.
Okay. So the first time I bring Coach a report, like I bring in the report, which there was no template, by the way. And at this time, it was just like numbers on a screen. So we kind of put something together. And he was like, was it hard? And I was like, I think so. And he was like, he got really pissed and sent me out. And that's when I learned a really valuable lesson, that data is useless without insight. And so it wasn't his fault. It was my fault. So we tracked the season. We had 10 wins the first year, which was a huge jump. 6-10. We played for the championship and lost. The next year, we're very talented. We're injured. We barely got 8 wins, I think. Had to beat Notre Dame and like the some bowl. Anyways, Champs Bowl. So after the season, coach was like, well, would you share what you found? And I'm like, well, first of all, we're playing like almost 3 games during the week before we get to Saturday. So the guys are fatigued. I showed them, like, I understood about monotony and strain. I was like, look at training camp. It's just super monotonous. Like the first day is just as hard as the 15th day. I was like, we should have some, periodizations. Like, let's just build up a little bit, right? And then we need to take a day off before it's too late. Because like day 7 to day 10, the soft tissue injuries just start exploding. So, we're trying to be super simple. Like, take a day off early, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, our training could be changed a little bit to match the demands of the game more. Now, there were people in the building that were not happy with this. They felt threatened.
Mm-hmm.
because like, you're going to get us all fired. I'm like, why? They're like, because what if you find out somebody's doing something wrong? I'm like, it's not about that. It's about like, what am I doing wrong? And so there was a lot of tension, to say the least. There were coaches that would grab me in their office, like, what are you trying to do here? And I talked to them about stuff, and I'm like, but I'll be honest, like, I have the perspective of time now. Coach Fisher just took over for Bobby Bowden, like, legendary football coach, one of the most historical programs, and he's basically putting his stuff on the chopping block. Because if he makes decisions that he does, you know what I'm saying, that don't work out, it could cost him his job. And there's actually a video out there somewhere of him talking about this. But it worked out. We got the sports medicine staff was great. The guys there are still friends of mine. Everybody, we were starting to do things to kind of like red flag injuries, and we do soft tissue work. And I mean, dude, the sophistication of what was going on. We're wearing headsets. We would talk in the morning with the head coach and staff meeting about guys we thought we needed to limit. Now, we were talented. And so then, like, I'd have a headset on during practice and the walkie-talkie, and I'd be like, hey, coach, we're 50% there. We're 75% there. And the coach would, like, literally pull a guy off the field. Like,
that's awesome.
Nobody was doing this.
Yeah.
He dropped our injury rate 88% that year. The same roster, not one person changed, won the championship. Almost went to the national championship. We were right there. And then the next year they won the national title. Great coaches, excellent players. And it was just this, like, there was a lot more continuity. Well, Mark Stoops, our defensive coordinator, you know, he grabbed me one day. There was this thing that happened. He pulled me in his office. He goes, listen, I have no idea what you're doing, but I have a freaking amazing defense. Just help me. Like, whatever you think, like work with me. Let's get these guys to game day. And it was really simple. And that's one of the reasons he decided to bring me to Kentucky, because he got the head coaching job at Kentucky. And then something else I think you'll find funny. He told me later on down the line, one of the reasons I hired you is because everybody thought you were going to fail as the DFO. And he goes, but you didn't. And I knew that you could do things. And so, so he, you know, Kentucky at the time is horrid. Like, the cellar dweller. I mean, just Kentucky basketball, top of the food chain. Kentucky basketball, football, very bottom. And I was fortunate enough to be like one of his first hires. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to be this high performance director. He's like, well, what does that mean? And so I put it all on paper, and he's like, all right. And
that's a lot to juggle back then. Right now, it's significantly easier because you have a lot of stuff to help you. You have technology, organizing. Then you had to create everything. I remember you're doing like a red, yellow, green day, right?
Yeah. So listen, man, when you're early, you make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes. The problem with that is you have to live with those mistakes. And sometimes there's not a lot of grace. But, and then you have to balance out in football, culture, training, what do these guys need? And there were some mistakes I made. Like, I thought, just to be honest, that the players there would just want everything that we were going to bring to them. They didn't.
Yeah.
There were some guys that did, and those guys are in the NFL right now. It's Darius Smith, Bud Dupree, Avery Williamson, you know, and there's a bunch of other guys that didn't make it to the league, but like really changed themselves. And then those other guys that all they had known was losing. And so it's like, what is this? You know what I'm saying? And I think that, you know, we all have ability, psychological capability, but some people are just winners and some people just either aren't or they haven't gotten there yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And so I definitely overvalued some things early, but We did make some incredible discoveries that help people. The fluid periodization stuff that we did with Dr. Chris Morris, who was my graduate assistant. I don't know if you've ever seen this paper, but we used Omega Wave to create a fluid periodization model. Yes, what we would do is the guys would come. We let guys opt in if they wanted to. So about half the team decided to do this on their own. We didn't make them. And we would say, listen, we had like 5 or 6 different programs running, for all the different positions. And we're like, if you do this, you have to just test before you train. And then we're going to adjust as we go. So like green was their physiological systems were good. Just do the plan. Orange was like, we're going to make a modification based off CNS or HRV. Red was something was really bad. Blue was like, we're going to try to do 20% more today. And over a period of 8 weeks with the same person training right next to them, same program, the guys that used the fluid model had a 300 to 500% more improvement in our KPIs. This is Hank Krajnoff wrote a blog about this. You can go find the paper. And so the guys that did it, I mean, it was just, and the interesting thing is the comment, like we actually did less volume with those players.
Yeah.
Sure.
It was like 10% less volume, which is remarkable. So, I had the opportunity to do a lot of stuff. That's when I started my PhD, my doctoral work, because I was like, if I'm going to do this high performance thing, like the rest of the world, you have to have a doctoral degree, an MD, something like that. So I started that there, and I studied sleep. Because I was like, what are the 3 things you can't live without? Food, water, and sleep. And so I was like, I want to learn how sleep affects our ability to adapt to stress. Because as you know, it's all about adaptability. And so we looked at how much sleep do you need to be in an optimal state of adaptation using DC potential from Omega Wave. Do you guys know what DC potential represents? Should I tell people about that?
Yeah, definitely go into it.
Yeah, so direct current potential. So if you ever seen Omega Wave, it's like you put a patch on your head and your forehand, and you use heart rate variability around your chest. Well, people are like, what is this thing? It's been used for over 80 years in electrophysiological research. So the DC potential is like a delta wave, an alpha wave, or a theta wave. It's a very slow cortical potential of the brain. And what it represents is how the brain, the central governor, is managing all the different subsystems of the body. And because it only responds to stimuli that is strong and frequent or consistent, it's a very stable potential. So unlike heart rate variability, where I can change it rather quickly, DC potential is hard to change. And so it's a physiological indicator of adaptation, how the brain's metabolism is working. And there is tons of research on it. Research in the United States, research overseas. And so DC, after looking at everything, I was like, I want to know, how much sleep puts us in these optimal ranges. And it was 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep for SEC football players during the season. So 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep is what put them in a range to be able to adapt to stress. Yep.
Now is that daily? So that day it was a direct correlation, or was it average accumulated weekly?
So 7 to 9 was acute. 7.5, 9 was 2 days back to back. So I think 7.5 is a better estimate. And what we looked at is something called a lag. So I slept last night. The next morning I measure. So how much sleep last night measures my ability to adapt the next day. Chronically, the most we could get was chunks of 2 with enough sample frequency was 7.5 to 9 hours. And you got to think about this too. These guys are genetically wired a little bit different than the average population. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if the average if these football players need 7.5 to 9, how much do you need?
Mm-hmm.
So it really started changing everything that I was doing at that time. Was like, how do I make the most resilient and adaptable athlete? And the methods and like the exercise, all that stuff became almost irrelevant. It was like whatever it takes to get them to be extremely adaptable is what I want to push towards. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not going to get married to anything. If it works, it works. And that's a hard pill for some to swallow because they get married to exercise, or they married to their program. But
did you look at different sort of intervention practices before the sleep? Like, how did it influence the quality of sleep? Did you do any tracking during the sleep, or was it just this DC?
No, to track the sleep, we used fatigue science at the time. So this is 2015. Like, it was the best tracker that we could get. Look, I'll tell you this. Anybody that says that they can understand REM and non-REM sleep without using polysomnography is completely full of it. So, like, when you see these deals like, oh, you had this much REM sleep and this much not, no. You have to use portable polysomnography or polysomnography to get that. Now, duration, one of the best ways to do it, I mean, like, if you have really good actigraphy algorithms now, like, a lot of these watches can get really close. But at the time, fatigue science was really kind of ahead of the curve. So we used them. And Nike actually paid for the bands. So I was on their sports council and I asked them if they would give us $5,000 for it. And they said yes.
Have you used any of the Oura Ring technology as of late?
Yes.
And how do you feel about that?
I try out a bunch of different stuff because I want to see what's out there. Here's my I think their sleep tracking is good. But the fact of like non-REM and REM. So here's the deal. When you go to bed at night, there is pressure for slow wave sleep. And here's why. During slow wave sleep, which is non-REM sleep, or the deepest part is the slow wave sleep, your body releases growth hormone. So if you look at research where people have been sleep deprived and they can take like a nap for 3 or 4, like in the middle of the afternoon, their body is going to prioritize that sleep to release that growth hormone to take care of their tissues, because that's when your body regenerates tissue, helps with tissue healing. But as the night goes on, like, those ratios change in these 90-minute cycles. And so it's really hard to know exactly from actigraphy movement what, how much of each phase you need. Like electrophysiology, which is polysomnography, that cap that they put on their head, and all that, to really understand that.
So
go ahead.
So they had said they compared the technology, the results of both, and they were within, I think they said 92 or 93%.
I would love to see that. I haven't seen that research. Is it on their website?
I think it may be, yeah. And if not, we had the CEO on, so I could just reach out to him and have him send over the research.
Yeah, he's from Finland, right?
No. So the owner, it's a Finnish company, but
yes,
the owner, the CEO is, I think he went to Michigan. He's from Jersey.
Okay, I would love to see that data. If that's true, that's great. I just know Dr. John Sullivan and I had a conversation about this recently. He wrote the book, The Brain Always Wins. And he's one of the top dogs in the world of applied neuroscience for sport. And none of us had seen data that, because I was looking at sleep quality and it was just hard. But I could be corrected. It'd be interesting to know. My problem with all this stuff is, like, it's a lot of data, not a lot of insight. Like, true, deep insight to push you in the right direction. Like, what exactly do I need to do? Versus, like, these just very general, hey, you need to rest more. You need to do, today's a day to dial it back, or today's a day to push a little bit more. That's like saying, use a driver or use an iron. Yeah, there's a big difference between my 3-iron and a 9-iron. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And so that is where the market needs to go.
So I have a mixed understanding of sleep. Now, when I first learned about sleep in college, I learned that, you know, you start off and it's light sleep, then you go into your deep sleep, and then you go into your REM sleep. And those are the sleep cycles that you kind of like, you know, all different waves of each based on brain waves, right? Or brain activity. And now with using the Oura ring and then doing some research, I had read that sleep was biphasic. So there were two healing aspects of sleep. It was the REM cycle and the deep sleep. And they happen almost half and half, because when you're in deep sleep, you lose hearing. But then when you're in REM sleep, you actually become paralyzed, or you lose the ability to move. And the body doesn't want both to occur simultaneously. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to die by predators.
Yeah, there's a phase where like your body relaxes, and that helps with tissue healing as well. But so there's three reasons why you sleep: detoxification of your brain using something called the glymphatic system. So the glymphatic system is like the lymphatic system for the brain, and literally at night, you're flushing out metabolic waste products. There's some really cool images you can find if you Google this. And one of some of those metabolic products are like beta amyloid plaque, which is associated with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Mm-hmm. The second thing is tissue regeneration. So the growth hormone spike. Now listen, if you ever read sleep papers, almost every sleep paper starts off with this: sleep is a mystery, and we're just learning more about it, because it really is. The deeper you go down this rabbit hole, we're just starting to pluck stuff out. So on the third piece is like learning and memory. Okay. So Titoni and Sorelli came up with this thing called the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis. And it's pretty much been shown to be true. I think it has, that when you sleep, there's selective strengthening and weakening of neural connections. And so what happens you follow Andrew Huberman?
No.
Oh, dude, beast. Yeah, Huberman's lab at Stanford, neuroscience. And what happens when you sleep, or during the day, when you try to learn something, when you're concentrating. So neuroplasticity is your mind's ability to change based off of stimuli, emotions, learning, cognition. And when you're learning something and focusing really hard, neurotransmitters mark certain neurons in your brain for later in the night. And what happens is when you sleep, then you have selective strengthening and weakening of those connections. Mm-hmm. So part of the sleep process is to complete the neuroplastic process that happens during the day. Mm-hmm. So if you want to adapt, you need to have stress, concentrated, focused periods of learning, physical training, etc. That's like very like frustrating, because that frustration actually kicks in some of the something like the sympathetic nervous system, and so you get some of the catecholamine response, which heightens your awareness. And then you have these markings with the neurotransmitters, and then when you sleep, then the brain goes, I'm going to strengthen these and weaken others, because everything can't be strengthened or the brain would like expand too much. And so it's like strengthening others and making others smaller. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
sure.
And so Titoni and Sorelli really put this out. I remember the first time I read this paper, I had to read it like 10 times, because I'm not like Keir Winninflat. Like this guy like reads something once and it's like stuck in his brain forever. It really frustrates me. I have to read stuff like over and over again. But yeah, like those are the three big things that happen during sleep.
And I mean, is sleep something that can really be improved, or do we kind of just need to stop fucking it up to let it do what it needs to do? Do you know what I mean? Because like you was mentioning, with all this data now, we keep finding out all these measurements, but there's not so much, behavioral intervention that we know definitely works. And I always felt like sleep is something that we know how to do it. We've been doing it for so long. We just need to stop interfering with it.
Yeah. So Now let's get into my opinion more than maybe what's in the literature, okay? Because I'd say the past 6 months I haven't been as deep in the literature, so stuff comes out, right? But it's just like anything else. Can you improve exercise? Yeah. If we warm up correctly, if we potentiate right, if we do certain things before other things, you see what I'm saying? Recruit more, sprint, and then go lift really heavy, not do super intensive lactic work, like, and these workload compatibilities. So yeah, you can improve your adaptive responses. Your ability to have more restful and fulfilling sleep can definitely be improved by the habits and the behaviors around sleep. So are you winding down?
Mm-hmm.
Are you turning the lights off? Are you, for some people, they like to take a warm bath or a warm shower. Diaphragmatic breathing. I think, Godango, you mentioned that before. Something else too. Have you guys heard any of this stuff about like dopamine in the sun?
No. Go on about that.
This is some good stuff right here. So I did a carousel on Instagram. So if anybody's listening, at erikkorem.com or at Erik Korem on Instagram, I put this one out called the Sun's Superpower. And it's a crazy, like if you see this thing, it's like this crazy image of me like leaping over the sun. But I was listening to some stuff on this. It's really interesting. If you view the sunlight early in the day on the horizon, it increases your dopamine reserves, right?
So it's dopamine, and it's also the melatonin timing system for later on in the day, right?
Yes,
exactly.
And if you view bright light between 11 and 4 a.m., totally screws it up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about like COVID, like when I heard about this, I'm like, crap, man, like I'm stuck inside all day. People aren't going out, especially early in COVID. Everybody was staying inside, and they're like, don't go on walks and don't, and people make the best decision for themselves. But and then you start having all these depressive symptoms, and it was happening in the wintertime. And so, like, you can think of all these compounding effects. So I started getting up in the morning, and the first thing I did is I do a couple of laps around the block, and I would try to look at the sun, like block through trees, and man, my mood started changing. And I had people write to me and be like, dude, change my life. Like literally there's a guy that's like, as soon as I started doing that, like my whole mental affect started changing. And it's like, back to your previous statement about can we improve sleep? Yeah, sometimes we just got to like put the right behaviors in place and get out of our own way and get back to like
primal living almost.
Yes.
Circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
Circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in living in circadian rhythm, or in accordance with circadian rhythm, you wake up when the sun rises, and what do? You open your eyes and you're looking at the sky, or you get out of your freaking cave and you look at the sky, and you're eating, right? Or you're looking for food, or you're exercising, looking for food first thing in the morning. Like, or if you're hungry, I suppose, and it's going to take you a little while to get it. But I think one of the things that we really, really there's two things that we really screw up. Stimulants.
Yeah,
the coffee, the legal stimulants are, I haven't had any caffeine for like 4 years now. It's, bro, do it. I love it. It's easy.
How long did it take you to kind of break that?
The only thing that, I'm like one of those, time to do it, but my workout sucked for years. Like I was a big pre-workout guy. I loved pre-workout, but
I don't use that.
Oh, I love it. I'm a big pre-workout guy. I'll shotgun, scoops to the face. I love
Currently or before?
Before. No,
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a recovering addict.
Okay.
And the other thing is eating late. So we're not supposed to eat when it's dark out, because prior to the creation of artificial light, we didn't eat because we couldn't see what we were eating. Unless it was, cooking over the fire or something like that. But by then, all the food was probably gone. So I read something from Rhonda Patrick, and she said, for every 10% of calories consumed past 5 p.m. leads to a 3% increase in C-reactive protein. That's our measurement for systemic inflammation, right? So if you're chronically inflamed, Not only are you chronically inflamed, right, but the cortisol wakes you up in the morning as well, or it ruins your sleep. So if you need to get REM sleep later on, as I'm currently learning that you get deep sleep first half of the night and REM sleep second half of the night.
That's exactly how it's set up. That's what I was saying. Like, yeah, go ahead.
And after that, on top of that is it takes your stomach 4 to 6 hours to clear contents like actual food, solid food from it. It takes 4 to 6 hours to clear it. So that means after it leaves your stomach, it still has to be digested. What does digestion do? It increases heart rate. So if I eat a meal past 5, 6, 7 p.m., you can notice, and I track it with the Oura Ring, I notice that there's a 10% increase in my heart rate. So my lowest, my minimum heart rate will go from like a 49 to 51 area to a 56 to possibly even as high as 60, right? Now you think like, 60 beats per minute, no big deal. That's 10 to 20% increase in my resting heart rate in my recovery mode. So what do you think that's doing to my recovering? That's reducing it. And to top it off, every time, I believe it's like a ratio of secretion of epinephrine or norepinephrine, right? So the higher your heart rate, the more likely you are to secrete it because you're more inclined to utilize glucose as a source of energy during that time. Right. So I believe I could be talking out of my ass that the epinephrine encourages the secretion of glucose as well. So it's like the one helps the other.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So now with your heart rate elevated, you're more stimulated. So now not only are you overstimulated in your sleep by 10, 20% than you should be, you also have the higher C-reactive protein, which is higher systemic inflammation. So chronic stimulation, chronic inflammation leads to more chronic stimulation and more chronic inflammation. So it's just a constant battle. So it's like, if we just stay out of our own way, we will sleep properly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually had to think back. Like I had a later meal on Saturday night, and I think on Sunday I looked back at my data and my heart rate was pretty high. And I was like, what's going on? That I had not thought of that before. That is really insightful. Now I'm really concerned because I do jujitsu 3 times a week at night, 6:30 to 7:30, and we're eating it later. So I need to go back and look. I'm not going to concern, but I'm really interested now to go back and look at Monday night, Wednesday night, Friday nights and see how what my heart rate looks like, and then what the next day
and
parasympathetic tone is.
What I would do if I were you is I would just have my meal prior to jujitsu. I mean, what's the difference between a pre-workout meal and a post-workout meal if you already ate before the workout? It takes 4 to 6 hours to digest anyway. And unless you're doing a double, you don't need the instant glycogen replenishment anyway. So you're not. And to top it off, the presence of insulin blunts the effects of growth hormone anyway. So any benefit that you're getting from the growth hormone is just getting shut down through insulin secretion. So it's like you're kind of, if you just have a pre-workout meal on your Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you're kind of helping yourself out.
I think I'm going to have to try this. I don't want to eat too much because have you ever done any combat sports?
Yeah. I grew up fighting.
Oh, you'll hurl if you get into a really good, well, actually it's cooling down, but like, you know how it is. If you're in like a really humid room and you've got food on your stomach, I mean, people are just like, you're like, oh gosh, go.
Some neon belly. That's lovely, isn't it?
No question.
But as we was talking before, I mean, you were mentioning about how you love backpacking. I mean, very rarely do you see people have sleep problems when they're out camping. I mean, you want to eat before it gets dark because it's a pain in the ass to cook when it's dark.
Yes.
Right. And then you're struggling to stay awake. Yeah, you're struggling to stay awake, and especially if you've done some, decent walking beforehand,
I can't wait to get back out. There's something about being in the backcountry and there's no stimulation.
It's the best.
Yeah.
It takes a few days to kind of bring it down, but then you just like don't want to go back to anything else.
Yeah.
And that would be for me, I have a hard time shutting my brain off and not ruminating on things. And I think I've gotten a little bit better over time, becoming more mindful of my thoughts. But when you're in an environment like that, or like in a relaxing beach, something where you're connected to nature, it's like it just brings you down. And I don't know how I would do in a big city.
Bro, I'm in New York all the
Yeah.
time. I hate it. People think I'm nuts. I'm 20 minutes outside New York City. I don't go. The only time I go is to go see Kevin Love. That's it. I go to work. He goes, "Hey, the city's not so bad, huh?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm in, I'm out, and the traffic sucks both ways." Like, yeah, the city's bad enough. Like, I'm not staying here.
Yeah, I gotcha.
No way. But I'm with you 100%. You go outside. So I had brutal anxiety, like debilitating anxiety. It kept me up for 8 days straight. Anxiety, right? It was bad. I started getting like OCD. It was really bad because I was up all night. And one of the only times that I was actually able during that period that I was actually able to chill out and relax was when I went on my walks, and I actually was able to take a 20-minute nap maybe twice during that 8-day period. And it was when I was outside. That was the only time I was ever able to actually chill out and relax. Being outdoors is awesome.
I think you mentioned this to me before in a message. We were going back and forth, but you do diaphragmatic breathing every night, you said?
I should. So when my anxiety's really bad, I stay on top of it. And the diaphragmatic breathing that I do, the cadence is a 10-second exhalation, 2-second pause, 2-second inhalation, 2-second pause. So it's more about the exhalation, because inhalation increases heart rate, exhalation slows down the heart rate. So
So how many breaths are you getting per minute? It's like
2, 3.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's
you want a meditative state, like a true, like I think it's like less than 5 or 6 breaths a minute. Sullivan mentioned something to me once about that. That guy's that you want to have him on.
Absolutely. We'll absolutely have him on. We'll reach out to him.
Yeah.
So this is when I love, and we have a sleep guy coming on right after you too. So it's going to be,
he's going to listen to me. Korem's an idiot.
So when I inherited Kevin Love, he was only getting 4 minutes of deep sleep a night and maybe like 30 minutes of REM. So one of the big things that we did with him was I cut out. First, his nutritionist had him eating his biggest meal before bed. He literally had double the serving of protein before bed, and it was usually a steak.
Oh, so, it was keeping him up, and like we talked about before, elevated heart rate, less parasympathetic activity.
And on top of that, he loves wine. So he'd have 2-3 glasses of wine before bed. And he figured, but I mean, we're always taught, and I'm Italian, so it's like, oh, a little wine before bed, it's healthy for you, right? So if you have a glass of wine before bed, it ain't going to kill you. 1 to 2 glasses, it's shown to raise HDL. See, it's good for you, you know? So he figures, well, I'm 7 feet tall, I'm 260 pounds. I could have 3 glasses. What's the big deal? So his heart rate was increased. So what did I do? I told him, cut out the alcohol and let's switch. I said, you're not going to stop eating past 5 p.m. I understand that. Let's switch your second to last meal and your last meal. So instead of having your huge, big serving of steak before bed, flip-flop it and have your half serving of protein. And his deep sleep now, he still is a terrible deep sleeper. And coincidentally, the guy suffers from anxiety, like battles with anxiety and depression all the time. But since we've been doing this, has mitigated both symptoms of anxiety and depression, and his sleep has improved tremendously. Now, if he gets 40 minutes of deep sleep and 40 minutes of REM sleep, it's like, come on, that's a bad night. And that's bad, but he's improved so much just through those 2 things. And no caffeine later.
With your athletes, have you ever had them tested for sleep apnea?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, that is, when I was with the Texans, we were using fatigue science, and there were some guys that, once again, it's hard with the wrist stuff and they're moving and stuff to really know. Like some people are just active sleepers, and there's nothing you're going to do about that. That is just like their nature. They just move a lot. And so you're like, dude, you only slept like 2 hours last night? They're like, no, I went to bed at this time and I woke up at this time. And I'm like, well, how rested are you? And like, and then you would find some of them, you would talk to guys and then you'd find out, sleep apnea was an issue. You're like, hey, does your wife or your girlfriend tell you that you wake up gasping for breath? well, let me ask. And then they come back and they're like, yeah. I'm like, hey, we need to get that checked out. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of bigger folks with the bigger necks, they struggle with sleep apnea.
So sleep apnea, is that classified only when there's excessive fatty tissue in the throat, or is there also when there's blockages within the nasal passage too? Because I notice a lot of the hockey guys I work with, they've got such fucked up nose that they can't breathe in very well through that either. So they end up relying on mouth breathing throughout the night. And I wonder also if that ends up, in sort of encouraging the esophagus to sort of become obstructed.
I don't know if I don't believe in the literature it says like it has to be this or that, but it's rather, and I need to look up, I would need to go back and look at this again. That's the one thing about like when you study something for so long, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. But I don't believe there's anything in the definition about if it's through the nasal passageway or if there's obstruction in the back of the throat, or if it's just the way that their neck is positioned. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe that is like part of the classical definition, but it has to do more with, obstruction of air.
Yeah, I know with guys that are obese, it's almost a guarantee that they suffer from sleep apnea. So your linemen. And then I also know that are certain things that will encourage sleep apnea through inflammation. So if you have someone that's allergic to dairy, which 65% of the global population is lactose intolerant, that means they're going to have some kind of response to dairy, and it's in all of our diets. Chances are we should be taking it out and not drinking it before bed. Majority of the people will get phlegmy from any foods like that. Glutens, any kind of hard digesting foods prior to bed causes an issue.
You've really got me thinking a little bit about how I'm eating before I go to bed. I don't eat late, but you've got me thinking about switching around the.
If you want, so I wrote an article years ago because I go total Rain Man on things. Like it's pathetic. I just get so focused in to the point. It's like all I can do is count, pretzels on the floor. You know what I mean? Like so I honed in on sleep a couple of years ago when I struggled with it. Because I needed to learn all about it and how it helps the body. One of the things that helped me was, even let's say I eat at 5 p.m. If I made my last meal a vegan-based meal at 5 p.m., that actually helped with digestion, because carbohydrates are easier to digest, typically are easier to digest than proteins. Proteins take a while. I mean, you need the secretion of peptides in order to break down proteins, right? What do you need to break down carbohydrates? Salivary amylase.
Starts in your, that's what I say. Salivary amylase starts in your mouth.
Right there. And the hydrochloric acid will break that shit down instantly, and it's quick absorption. The only problem is when you're having foods like that, it's bulky. That's the other thing too. Like, I've been diving into the carnivore aspect of life right now. Brooker and I swear by it right now.
You're doing carnivore diet.
Straight up carnivore diet, and I love it. My resting heart rate dropped to the lowest that it's been. I'm leaner than I've been in years. I had 3,700 calories yesterday. I didn't gain a friggin' pound. I keep losing fat. I breathe great. I'm not, if you listen to earlier podcasts, I'm clearing my throat every 5 minutes. Bro, I barely clear my throat now.
So okay, so I did, I experimented with keto. Okay.
I've done that.
Which is basically the carnivore. I mean, you're going to get into ketosis, right? You're going to live there. My jiu-jitsu sucked. Like, I was just like,
Well, so here's the thing. It depends on the heart rate that you're going to be chilling at. When I'm in carnivore, what do you get? What aren't you getting? You're having a depletion of glycogen, right? So what's going to suck? Lactic work. Yep. Any kind of anaerobic threshold type shit. You're not going to last very long, and you're not going to be very good. But you're like a Prius. You know what I mean? Like, hey, you're just cruising along, and you're just.
So I'm
humming.
into cycling now, and so that would be great. I keep everything in zone 2, but that was the one thing. Like, we are really into. My wife actually started a company that my wife runs, and I have 2 other guys. It's called BJJ Prep, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Prep, and And so we're actually helping a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu athletes. And, you know, you start talking to them about their diets. And when I started doing it, you know, it was like when I was doing keto, and I just had to stop because I was getting tapped just out of fatigue. And that is the one thing you never want to do is tap to, I will tap to pain before you give up to fatigue, because then you have to live with yourself. You know what I'm saying? If somebody's like cranking on your neck and it's super painful and you're training, you know, you tap and you're like, and they're like, was it a choke or a crank? You're like, it was a crank. But there's no disrespect. If you tap to fatigue, like, you have to live with yourself until you train again. And speaking of that, by the way, you do a lot with combat athletes?
Bro, whoever comes in is what I end up studying. You know, I'm a mercenary, you know.
So aerobic work, like, I've been writing articles and helping these guys out, and it's like, I don't know what happened with the 1980s and, you know, in the physiology textbooks of, you know, I grew up in going through exercise. When did you graduate college or undergrad?
2010, I think.
Okay, so I graduated in 03, and like our textbooks, it was like, you know, anaerobic, aerobic, you know, and it was like, you know, the three phases of this, and now, you know, we know it's all blended and mixed in. But getting athletes,
I had that too.
Yeah. And it was like, you know, this is funny. I got my master's degree, and in my defense, they asked me, this is so bad. This is embarrassing. Okay. I'm embarrassing myself for you. They asked me, what was the aerobic contribution to pitchers in baseball? And I was like, minimal. And of course, these were all exercise physiologists. So I just like basically pissed on them, you know, and they were upset, and they made me write a paper to defend my stance on that. And I actually used the literature to defend myself. But then if I go back now, I'm like, oh, there's a huge aerobic contribution. Why do you think these guys naturally tend to get on a bike after a game? That they feel better, but they feel like they need to do something because their heart rate is elevated because of anxiety, the frequency of pitches. You know what I'm saying? There is this like,
I think that's cultural. I think they're just told. It's learned behavior. There are guys, if you look at other guys that don't really study any kind of baseball, they just happen to be good at it. They do none of the social norms associated with baseball, like the running of the poles, the getting on the bike and flushing.
Yeah, I'm not into any of that stuff. I'm just saying though, like, there is like, if you develop some of this stuff, it's going to, like, for instance, in football, in Kentucky, we were having guys do cardiac output work, and they're like, it's going to make you slow. Dude. And it only improved their conditioning. Here at Kentucky, I mean, at William & Mary, we did a ton of extensive tempo stuff and multi-directional tempo work. And on off days, guys would get on bikes, right? 30, 40 minutes or incline treadmill walks. Had a running back coach who's now at the Panthers. And he told me at the end of the season, he was like, and this was my last year, by the way, in sport. And he was like, it was the best compliment I've ever received. He's like, not once in the entire season did we ever look tired. He goes, I've never experienced that before. And that was like the biggest compliment, because a lot of the coaches like, Coach London is fantastic. Mike London is one of the best. And he's adapted. He is like, but they were like, this makes no sense. But the aerobic contribution to sport, especially these combat athletes, you know, when you break it down to them, that jiu-jitsu for black belts for 10-minute rounds is mostly spent in these very low heart rate ranges, and all they want to do is high intensity work. Like, that's a very poor decision. You're going to get all of that on the mats. But the area that you're not training, I don't know how I got onto this. This has just been something that's been in my mind lately.
Who cares?
Who cares?
And the cycling has been helping me on the mats.
Well,
Sure.
so you think about like this. It's lowering your resting heart rate. So you're increasing mitochondrial density, which is taking the stress off the cells. And on top of that, you're lowering your resting heart rate through keeping it up, and then it's going to have that adaptation. So now all of a sudden your typical max heart rate, which is increased through the submaximal aerobic work, now it has to go that much further in order to get there. Like, no shit.
And what about like the type, like when we grew up in exercise physiology, they talk about type 2B or type 2X fibers, and that's what you type 2B fibers, which you like for field sport athletes, it's type 2A. You have a lot of myoglobin concentration. They're fatigue resistant. The aerobic component is very critical to their function. And somebody, saw something in the pandemic. Somebody was talking about like how their athletes went home and they didn't do as much field work and they got faster. I'm like, do you know the easiest way to increase type 2X fiber? Bed rest.
There you go.
Literally, number one way. Learned this in my doctoral work. It's like if you want to speed up, and I of course I bring this to Kieran. I'm like, I got a fact he doesn't know. I was like, hey Kieran, you know the fastest way? He goes, bed rest. I'm like, you freaking jerk. Because we saw the same post and we were like, all you got to do is lay somebody to bed. There's very little aerobic stress. So the tissues do what? They adapt to not needing it as much. And you have a shift. But I don't know. We just went down a rabbit hole.
So now that you're a William and Mary with Kia, we mentioned him a couple times.
Yeah.
Now you've got two powerhouses
I actually
there.
just
What's
left.
your program? Oh, you've just left. Okay, well we'll get to that afterwards. But what's this program been like?
Good angle. You just went, huh?
Couple of years.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
No worries, buddy.
Yeah.
What's the program been like? What did you? I mean, obviously, Keir has a fantastic career from rugby that now he's transferring over into football. Yeah. You've had your experience. What was the culmination?
Yeah. So the reason I hired Keir was, look, like I have learned more about hiring since being at William and Mary, and it's changed a lot of things for me. I ended up here. I got fired by the Texans. New general manager came in, part of pro sports. It's just the way it is. And I had an opportunity. I was out and I was finishing my doctoral work. And I mean, I'd only been out a few months and I had somebody, connection to the athletic director. And she was like, hey, I want to do this thing, this high performance thing I've heard about. And so that's why I came to William & Mary. And so the director of athletics, I had this opportunity to hire this position. And I'd heard about Keir. I actually heard him speak at the CVAFs, and Jay DeMayo texted me, is like, dude, you have to hire this guy. And when I saw him present, I was like, man, this guy's thinking on a whole nother level. And he's not constrained by his experience in sport. That's not where his mind's operating. And so I really took a flyer. The other thing you got to understand is when you're when you're in the Power 5 or you're in the NFL, you have more money. So you have a broader pool to choose from, and you can be extremely selective. When you're in a place like a FCS school, you have very little money. There's not a lot to offer. And so like it's mission and somebody that's like life circumstance that gets you people. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So Keir was right down the road. We had a conversation. Honestly, I didn't really know him, and that was a risk, that is a big risk. And I'm looking at things from a very different perspective now because I'm building a company. And, and so when I hired Keir, we clicked, and here's why. Like, he's totally different than me. I'm a lot more conservative. He's not. He's very brash and outspoken, but he's got a great heart. And I forget about talent. Like, he's a genuinely great human being. And he was all about the mission. He had been screwed before. He had been burned in pro sport. So we both knew what that feeling was like, and we didn't want to do it to each other. And so I would lean heavily on him. He'd lean on me. And then we brought Scott Q&N, who was an intern of mine at Kentucky, who stalked me at CVAS like years before, like literally stalked me and like got a minute of my attention. Was like, Erik, Coach Korem, can I come intern for you? And I was like, yeah, weirdo. Like, if you show up. And he was one of the best ever. And he just went to Arizona. So we were able to put together and bring in some athletic trainers. But Keir is one of the best problem solvers I've ever been around. And it doesn't matter the sport. It really doesn't even matter the situation. His ability to use mental models is like unparalleled. Like, he can look at a problem and rip it apart. And that's intimidating for some people. I don't find it intimidating because I love finding talented people and letting them do what they do and do it well. and letting them innovate between the lines or innovate with discipline. But that's what he's really good at, is problem solving. He started working with throwers. He never trained throwers, and he had fantastic results with them. And he got along great with the coaches too.
So I was on one of your Q&As yesterday, right? Like where I always end up listening to a couple of bits, chiming in, and you had started talking about interviewing and what you did to people that you brought in when you were with the Texans, was it?
No, was it William & Mary? Yeah.
So Brooker, tell this story. You got to hear
Yeah.
this.
So I had an experience in the military, and that's all I'll say. Okay. And really, so my dad wrote the book, The Art of Profiling, and he's an expert in behavioral profiling. And so that I had to grow up with that. And I learned profiling more like, and it's not like, it's how to communicate with people, how to treat them in a way that they uniquely deserve to be treated. Doesn't mean you don't make mistakes, but I've always really wanted to connect with people. And I had this experience, and I really started rethinking the hiring process. And a lot of people screw up in this area. And so what we started doing is creating kind of crucible moments or putting people under stress in the hiring situation. So especially in athletics, it's a stressful environment. As a friend of mine, Brian Decker, says, it'll, just like the military, it'll take a pound of your flesh. And so I don't want to know how somebody handles stress and pressure when the moment comes. I'd like to know before. So we would fly in candidates together without them knowing that there were a final kid. So like 3 people would show up, and they get there at the same time at the airport. They're like, wait, you're here to interview too? And we'd like make them be around each other. We'd take them to dinner. And then they would have to basically compete during the interview process. We'd give them problems the night before, and they'd have to come in and present. Or we'd like do a whiteboard scenario where like, here's a situation. You have 20 minutes to write it up, solve it, present on it, listen to the other people solve the problem in front of you. And then when you're done, then you have the opportunity to then change your, like whatever you put out, like your solution to the problem. So like, is this person humble enough to admit that, hey, that actually was a really good idea with somebody that they're competing with? Then it's like everybody gets to see this person under a stressful situation, and it's apples for apples. They're right next to each other. And it's not like biases are eliminated a little bit faster. And it was just so interesting that there was more consensus on who should be hired across the board for different scenarios. And the individuals that we did this for, the positions, those people have been some of our best hires.
So I was thinking about that, and I don't know. I genuinely don't know how I would respond to that situation, because I've been thinking about it since you said it. Right.
And I don't know if it's appropriate for every situation. Okay. Yeah. I'm not saying that's the way it should be done across the board. That was just to preface that.
Yeah. I get it. But so did you have them working together, or did you have, hey guys, we have this problem, everyone do it at the same time? Who do you think solved it better?
I had them, hey, everybody do it at the same time. Then they presented to the group. They didn't get feedback in front of each other. It was just like, hey, like you have somebody that's X amount of months post ACL. They're in this transition phase. Here are the contraindications for training. Go. Or whatever the situation was, like, okay, field hockey, break down the sport. Like, so we have these. Okay, so we had pre-qualifying questions that we asked when they sent in their resume. That was an eye opener. People that like, how does a high performance team operate, and what does it mean to be a part of a high performance unit? People would just like totally just didn't even look the word up or the phrase. It was just like you could just get rid of like 80% of people just by that right there. Like, can they actually answer a question? Not even a hard one, just softballs that have to do with the group they're about to go into. Then we would have pre-qualified questions that we'd ask them in their video interview to eliminate. And then like the night before they came on their visit, we gave them a project. So now we're putting them under a little bit of pressure. They have to get something ready quickly. Maybe it's just a one-page summary of X, Y, or Z. And yeah, like when you are for the right situation in the right environment, when you come out the other side of that, you're like, I'm meant to be here.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not saying it's for everybody, and I'm not saying it's for all hires. I don't think I would do that with your HR hire. I don't think, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I would do that with our executive assistants. And I don't, I just think that we needed a tight knit unit that felt like they belonged, and those people were pretty fiercely loyal to each other.
That's pretty cool, right, Brooker?
Mate, it's awesome. I mean, the first thing that come to my mind was you seeing the real character just reveal itself, and through continual different tasks, and it's the best way to see it. Like you said, you don't want to know the real man when shit's hitting the fan. Right.
And they felt like they had accomplished something to be there.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for like, I deserve to be here. Mm-hmm. And then as Keir says, every single day he shows up to the job, he's proving why he has earned that position and why he's the best for it. So that was something that came out of an experience that I had. And it was a lesson learned. And as I think about building my team now for the things that I'm doing, the person that I had on, that guy, Michael, building better teams, that guy's a freaking, you need to go back and look at his content. He's a young guy. He really, all the things that he's posting about, I'm like, those are major issues I've seen in big organizations that he is nailing. Boom, 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 boom. And that's why, to me, most sports teams fail. Is, I mentioned it, you have people that are in positions that they're not skilled to be leaders.
Yeah.
And they're just really good at X's and O's, and they're out punching their weight, and then it just ain't, it ain't gonna last very long.
So from Kentucky, you went to Texas.
Yeah, the Texans, yeah.
From the Texans, you went to William and Mary. And from William and Mary,
I'm moving back to Houston.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So I'm from Dallas originally. And I went to Texas A&M. I was a walk-on football player there. And that's really where my love began. That's a whole other story. So I've moved 10 times in 15 years. And my wife has been along. Let's see. We got married in Mississippi.
What a saint.
Dude.
What a saint.
Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, Georgia, Florida, Kentucky, Texas. 5 times since we've been married. And I had to count them on my fingers. That's when you know it's bad. And number one, like, it was just time. Like, I needed to prioritize. Not that my family hasn't been a priority, but there's so much on life I've been missing out on. Like real living. My life should not revolve around, the fall, and I can't take my sons camping. I can't do this with my wife. Now, there's other things that I was able to do that people will never get to do, and open doors for us to do things that other families won't get, that there was a blessing with that, but there was also this other part, stress wise, it was too much and too much work. And, for not enough, like everything is like, you can do the best job. I mean, freaking crush it and you're fired. So I'm like, you know what? I had an experience. I'm actually drinking out of the mug. Presidential Leadership Scholars. So when I was finishing my doctoral work, a buddy of mine, David Dixon, he's like the all-American Marine. He was my RA in college. We grew up near to each other. He's a Marine Cobra pilot, got his master's at Harvard, got an MBA at Stanford. I always told him, I was like, dude, you look like the prototypical Marine, square jaw. No joke. He sent me a picture in Times Square. His mug was up there representing the Marines. So he comes to William & Mary, he goes, and I'm about to defend my doctoral dissertation, and like, this is not the time to be doing anything new. And he's like, Eric, you need to do the PLS program. I'm like, what is this? And he's like, President Bush 41 and 43, the Clinton Foundation and LBJ Foundation got together. So these living presidents at the time, 3 of the 4, said, hey, well, we want to bring one thing. We want to put together a diverse group of people that can help solve some of the greatest problems in the world in our country, bring civility back to the conversation, and show that different people, I mean, like radically diverse people, can get along and help each other for the betterment of our country. And so I was like, dude, there's no way they're going to accept me. Like, I'm, you know, the coach working, you know. And I got in, and talk about imposter syndrome. So for about 7 months, you literally get trained by the presidents themselves and their former administrations, like the who's who. It's all off the record. They fly you to DC for a week. You go to they fly to all these presidential libraries, and you are connected to people with NGOs, like major companies, people that are in public service, and everybody has a project. And they basically teach you how to scale an idea, grow it for maximum impact, and then you have this cohort you can draw on of people that are doing this at the highest level in the world. And just there's some amazing, like, so one of the companies, this guy, what's it called? Gosh, they're using drones. I'll think about it in just a second, to deliver medications to like people in different parts of Africa. Well, Walmart, there's a guy that was an executive at Walmart in our group, and this guy's company just joined forces. So Walmart is now using their stuff to deliver medications to people. I mean, just amazing stuff to help humanity. And my eyes were open, and I'm like, I could be doing more with the talents that I've been given. And so I had an idea and worked on it 18 months in. So we're got some early seed funding, and we're about to go out and raise a bunch of money and change the world. So I'm moving back to Houston to build it.
When are we going to know what it is?
Hopefully pretty soon.
Okay.
Maybe by the time the podcast comes out, I'll be able to put it on my LinkedIn page. But
cool.
All the things that I've been doing in high performance sport, we're going to bring those to everyday people in a way that's just very elegant and very simple and with major impact. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about that. And look, if I fail, I failed because, you know, there wasn't a product market fit. Eric didn't do his job, whatever, all the different things. But if we succeed, it's good because of a group of people that have done, you know, some extraordinary things. And I was just ready to not be living at the behest of somebody else. Mm-hmm. Some lunatic head coach that's totally detached from reality, making way too much money. And they're just like, I don't like that guy, you know, boom, gone. Like, you don't even exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And I understand in the business world that difficult decisions have to be made. But I also think there's better ways to run companies and organizations and building teams. So it's now my turn to be the head coach.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good luck with it, man.
Thank you.
So within this, was it PLS you called it?
Yes. Yeah.
How does the process work? I mean, are they looking at your individual personalities and trying to identify your strengths and weaknesses?
Dude, that's one of the great questions. We call this the magic of PLS, man. Like, you have to write all these essays, and then then you have to do like Zoom meetings where they interview you and ask you about your project and all. And they're looking, I don't know what it's like. How do you become a member of a certain special operations unit? Nobody really knows. Like, they have these like formulas. I don't know. I just know like that the people there, you just like, I mean, one of the girls so when you have these meetings, they sit you at tables and they're always mixing up the tables, right? But there's one girl, Dilafruz Kanak-Boyeva, she and I were like next to each other almost every time. And we're like, okay, they're trying to tell us something here. And I had her on my podcast. She's a conflict resolution expert, and she is flat out amazing. And we just really bonded and clicked. And she really helped flip my mindset on like how to deal with conflict and the things that can come out of that. And some of the stories of these people, like Mark Hadar, he's got a TED talk, like basically came over to the United States, like almost nothing in his pocket, like lived in an attic. You got to watch the TED talk. It's amazing. It's like 12 minutes, like what he did. And now he runs 2 amazingly successful companies, Dialexa and Bentley. And he's just like the all-American success story, or guys that were Navy SEALs that went on to Stanford Business School. And now they're solving some of the most complex issues in our society. You're just like, it makes you, I know this is an international audience, but it makes you believe in people again. Like what's going on in our country. Like I see like this group is working together, diverse group of people to listen, not react, and try to solve these problems. And it's a different field in sports where everybody's jockeying for position, for power grabs. And it's not everywhere. I'm just, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I hear you. So I had the good fortune of working with a coach named Nunzio Campanelli, who's now at Rutgers. I worked with him when he was at Bergen. I worked for him. And he said, only one person on the football field in the organization actually cares about winning. Only one person, he says, the head coach. The GM cares about his draft picks doing well. He said the OC and the DC, they care about how the offense does. Secretly, they kind of hope that the offense doesn't do that well, so they can get more possession, so they can get more time on the field and crush guys. So they can. Who
is this guy again?
Stats. The coach's name is Nunzio Campanelli.
Okay,
he's awesome, and he said everyone's looking. You know, the DCs are trying to get head coaching jobs, whatever, right? The linebacking coaches are hoping to become DCs one day. The GAs are hoping to become coaches, and the interns are hoping to become GAs. Right? Only one person in the entire org, and the strength coaches, all they hope is their guys do well. Like, oh, I hope our guys are the strongest guys in the field. I hope our guys don't get injured, right? But like winning and losing, like, it's kind of out of my hands. We love winning, but our goal is to make sure they don't get injured, right? Only one person.
Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. I hate that one.
Oh, bro, that's all since I've been in this, that's all I've heard.
Think about now, in business, not all businesses, the ones that are good, it's all about serving the customer, bringing something to market that actually solves a pain point. Mm-hmm. Everybody is unified around, are we solving the pain point of the customer? And if you're not thinking about the customer and like their experience and what drives them and what motivates them, like design thinking and iterating fast, and like you got an idea, like, and you're not reaching out to people to solve these problems, like you're going to fail miserably. And the person that can listening is valued. And I couldn't tell you how many times I was, told to just keep my mouth shut. And it drove me, not that I had the answers, but at least like, let's let it be heard.
Some kind of discourse. Let's talk about something, but no, like that. No one. That's what really sucks about. And I genuinely feel for any strength coach or any coach that just wants to work collaboratively, and that's just not the industry. It really sucks.
No, it's not. Not in its entirety. And the people and the organizations that do operate like that, or at least have more collaborative thinking processes, typically win more. And they can have a very strong head coach, but that head coach is seeking answers. And, that, like, I don't pretend to know all the different environments. I just know where the places that I've been, everybody's been locked arms. And you may not agree with the head coach all the time, but everybody knows where we're going, and we're all working in that direction with everything that we have. And then talent too. We're in business, like there's luck. There's, you hit a wave of, I had a product and then something happened in the market that stuff's going to happen. But if you have processes in place, you have good ideas, you have people that are working to solve a real problem in the marketplace, and you can go out and raise the money and get that thing scaled quickly, and you're willing to learn faster and make more mistakes, you can be a success. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully we're solving problems.
I will say this. One, I regret not talking to you sooner. Yeah. And I've known of you. When did you go to Kentucky? 2012?
Yeah, December 2012, so 2013.
Yeah. So I've known of you since 2013. I've texted back and forth or DM'd occasionally here and there. I deeply, deeply regret not reaching out sooner and not attempting to work for you or work with you.
Well, I feel the same way. There's so many great people that have come across your path at different times. And Kira, that's very humbling for you to even say that, but I don't know how to take that. But I just love being around good people. And I always had this dream in my mind of working on a staff where everything just clicked. And it just had, I had great, probably the closest where I was Sylvester Croom, first black coach in the SEC, was the SEC head coach of the year. Last time Mississippi State beat Alabama and Auburn in the same season. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about one of the finest men you have ever met in your entire life, and stinking fantastic coach. And the people that were on his staff, like the head coach of the New York Giants right now, former head coach of the Browns. If you just look at the roster of people, Shane Beamer, you go down the list, he knew coaches, and he brought in talented people and let them do their jobs. But thank you so much for having me on. You guys are great. I mean, this is a fun conversation. This is probably the funnest conversation I've had in a while.
Thank you, Erik, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I don't know what I'm more impressed with, mate, to be honest. Your history or your stories, or the fact that you're American and you knew about sports in another country. Because when you were talking about Australian rules football and Essendon, I'm like, hang on here.
Well, I was blessed to have an opportunity. So
hang
so
on
much.
Hang on the line, man. We're just going to end this now. Thank you again.
Yeah.